Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Swannanoa Valley. I'm Evan Yannick, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. The mission of the UUCSV is to create an open, active, and welcoming liberal religious community that nurtures spirituality, inspires growth and learning in the search for truth, and challenges us to live our values conscientiously through service and example. Our church is growing and journeying. We welcome all of you to our service, especially those of you who are searching for a spiritual home. Many of us were once too, seeking for something larger than ourselves to which we could belong, a sense of rootedness to hold us as we create meaning together. We do that well here, though not perfectly. In this congregation, we strive not for perfection, but for authenticity and connection. Whether it's your first time in worship with us, or your 100th, we hope that you'll find here questions that stretch you, people to befriend you, and liberal religious values that challenge you to join us in loving boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically. And now, to open our service, there's a special guest.
Love is the spirit of our church, and service is our prayer. We pledge to live together in peace, to always seek the truth, and to help one another.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome once again to our Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Swannanoa Valley. We are on a collision course with joy this morning, and you will see that in the sermon. I just want to use these opening words to let us become masters of ourselves that we may become servants to others. Take our lips, Spirit of life, and speak through them, and take our hands and work through them. Take our hearts and set them on fire. May the door of this church be wide enough to receive all in love who enter in, narrow enough to keep out envy and pride and strife, and smooth enough to be no stumbling block for our children. Thank you, Spirit of life, for the children. May we continue to walk by faith and not only by sight.
Hawe, Hawe, Somagwaza. Hawe, Hawe, Somagwaza. Hawe, Hawe, Somagwaza na Yowe. 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 Awash, Somagwaza.
All right, I'd like to invite you now to join us in singing our opening hymn this morning, hymn number 108, My Life Flows On, hymn number 108. The words I wanted to use this morning for our reading were from former UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, who was assassinated in a plane crash in Africa. I forgot to bring it in my hurry here, but I just want to set the stage. He talked about why we are sometimes afraid of change, even though we are always surrounded by it. And he said maybe one of the ways, or one of the reasons we are afraid of change is because maybe we feel that there won't be enough people around to carry out the changes that we'd like. I thought that was a very interesting thought, because we've seen all through the history of humankind that change is the only sure thing in life, and there are many religious disciplines who talk about that. But we have to have the faith, according to Dag Hammarskjöld, that the seeds we plant now will be harvested. Those actions will be taken. We may not be here. So patience is involved. But if we have trust that the seeds we plant will indeed sprout and grow, whether we see them or not, we will be tools of that change. This is the time in the service when we invite you to share a joy, a sorrow, a concern. We do this that we may keep a pulse on, and that I may keep a pulse on what's going on as far as pastoral care needs, etc., but also that we can be a support for you. And so, with no further ado, I invite you to share your joys and concerns.
This week we had one email joy and one video joy. Beata Ball sends in an email with a joy who says her son Gideon is losing 2 roommates and has asked his brother, her middle son Stephen, to be his new roommate. So Stephen will be moving away from home in the next couple of weeks. She's excited that he has this opportunity to ease into the wide world of independence. Congratulations, Stephen. And now, one of our congregants has a reading.
So my name is Joy Levine Abrams. I received something from a dear friend that felt valuable enough for me to want to share with you. She received it from her Zen master that she studied with when she lived on Cape Cod. Here we go. This week, pay some attention to your self-critical mind. Try not to be too judgmental of any tendency to judge yourself, but do notice each time some sense of dissatisfaction with your characteristics, your behavior, your tendencies arise, and quietly study it. Each time you find yourself criticizing one of your qualities and wishing you could change, just remember that you are always changing and that you do not need to force change. Relax into this awareness of your own natural way of constantly, subtly shifting, evolving. Rest there and allow the changes to take place. The mountain will transform in its own time. Be present with all of this constant transformation and enjoy things as they are and as they are coming to be. Da-da-da! So I hope to see you guys in the real flesh before terribly long.
For those of you who, for whatever reason, decided not to share a joy, a concern, or sorrow, just know that we keep you in our prayers, in our meditations, and in our hearts, and in our minds. We will have our time of quiet. I invite you to center yourselves in the way that you are most comfortable with, the way that you see fit. And again, we will have our time of quiet after the meditation. I want to remind us this morning about the gift we are receiving by being present in this historic time. There are people who are handling this situation, these events, as best they can, and many people are struggling with the changes, a new world being born, if you will. I remind us of the joy and the blessings that we constantly receive. If you woke up this morning, even with aches and pains or complaints, you did wake up this morning. The rest is gravy, as they say. And so just try to keep in mind during this time of pandemic and political upheaval that this is not the first time this has happened, but that we are here to be the midwives, if you will, of a new world that's being born. I want to share with you, as this meditation progresses, the words of Richard Gilbert. This is called The Gift of Today. Life is measured in years, while it is lived in days. Life's tales are told in generations of past, present, and future, while it is lived one day at a time. The gift of life is not a gift of great sweeps of years, but in the single day, the day in which we live now. It is tempting to live off the capital of yesterday or the anticipation of tomorrow. But it is today that the hands of the clock measure the hours of our lives. And it is the presence of time within that will show us its true significance. Why must we live in that can never again be, or the future that has not yet come? Why can we not look at the gift of today and fall on our knees in humble gratitude. And now, while our minds are one for this brief moment, I leave you all with the eloquence of silence. And so it is. I want to thank you ahead of time for your generosity. As you know, there's a little PayPal link you can press if you want to send us a monetary gift. I remind you of the words again of William James: the greatest use of life is to spend it on something that will outlast it. And so with that spirit, we will now collect this morning's offering.
I love to go wandering along the mountain track, and as I go, I love to sing my knapsack on my back. Fa-la-dee, fa-la-da, fa-la-dee, fa-la-da, fa-la-dee, fa-la-da, my knapsack on my back. I love to wander by the stream that dances in the sun. So joyously it calls to me, come join my happy song. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow me, follow, come join my happy song. I wave my hat to all I meet, and they wave back to me. And blackbirds call so loud and sweet from every greenwood tree. Follow me, follow, follow me, follow, follow me, follow, from every greenwood tree. High overhead the skylarks swing, they never rest at home. But just like me, they love to sing, as o'er the world we roam. Follow me, follow, follow me, follow, follow me, follow, as o'er the world we
This sermon came to mind. I've been talking to several people, and it's been interesting having conversations about what's going on now. But what has really fascinated me, and I can relate to it, is that some people are saying, I'm not seeing change. That all this has happened before, and there's some truth to that, but I'm not really, whatever's happening, this won't last. And I get it. I think people are just weary, but there's no doubt that we are living in historic times. And there are people who wish they had lived to see the times that we are in. And so these times can be both frightening and exciting times for many of us. The world is changing, and we must change with it. We must let go of the old paradigm or be dragged. You see, many of us say we want change, but when the time actually comes, we shirk from it. Why? Because in so many ways, change is really beyond our control. It's an interesting dynamic that I witness in some people, even during this time. I've come across people who don't think that things are changing fast enough, much, regarding the cultural issues of our time. I do marvel at this. I hear it from many brothers and sisters of color and white brothers and sisters as well. Mostly, though, I hear it from folk of color who are weary after marching and protesting after decades of trying to instigate some type of change. And I hear it from white brothers and sisters who say that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And now I have to be honest, the folks I'm hearing it from are from a certain generation. And again, there is some truth to this line of thinking. However, that doesn't mean that things don't change and that they don't change for the better. We are awash, always, in a sea of change. I think that what they really mean is that things are not changing fast enough or not the way that they wanted to. You see, because change is messy. Justice is messy. Diversity is messy. Equality is messy. Democracy is messy, especially when democracy is still simply an experiment. It is no doubt difficult to not be attached to outcomes that one has been striving for, standing up for, sitting down for, protesting for so many years. And it's quite natural for one to want to live to see the fruits of one's labor. Many people don't get to see that. We've been celebrating the life of John Lewis, who was fortunate enough to see some of the seeds he had planted come to fruition. But there's an old adage that says, a watched pot never boils. It is difficult to not be attached to outcomes, yet it is possible. We have to be prepared for the long haul when it comes to social change, and that requires tremendous patience. And when I'm talking about patience, I'm talking about patience being the calm acceptance that things can happen in a different order than we have in mind. And then, all of a sudden, it happens. Voila! All of the blood, sweat, and tears finally result in the change that we say we want. And then, it gets scary. It gets messy. I wanted change, we say, but I didn't want it this way. I didn't want it this rapidly. I didn't want it this fast. I mean, a virus? A virus? Social and political upheaval? A 45th president that is doing the best he can to imitate Caligula or Nero? When can we get back to normal, people say? It reminds me of the story in the book of Exodus when the Hebrew people are fleeing slavery from the Egyptians and they begin to get restless and they complain after a while. The going was rough. The desert was harsh. Food was in short supply. And then they started saying to Moses, we should have stayed in Egypt. What is this? Where are you taking us? At least then we knew what we were in for. Change is hard. And at the moment, you and we are awash in a sea of change. Life itself is change. The East Indian poet Tagore once said that the one who plants trees, knowing that he or she will never sit in their shade, has at least began to understand the meaning of life. These are profound words, and yet who among us can honestly say that the world, ourselves, and that people have not changed? And here we are witnessing this new world. Certainly not all people change behavior or ways of thinking, but that never happens. We are all at different stages of individual and collective evolution. But we are living in historic times, and we will look back on these days with great awe and wonder as the dots begin to connect. I mean, there's a comet. I forget the name of it, Neo something or other. Who knows the name of the comet? Anybody? Anyway, I'm supposed to try and go see it tonight. It's not going to come around till the year 68 something. I'm be long gone by then. But even the celestial, even the heavens are reminding us of change. We don't know where we're headed as yet, but we do know we cannot go back to what once was. This is what change is about. Victor Hugo once said that there's nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. Well, folks, here we are. All over the globe, people are yearning to be free from everything that oppresses them and keeps them from reaching their full human potential. Free from oppressive systems that treat people as mere cogs in a machine and not as flesh and blood people with dreams and aspirations and hopes and fears. And a deep, deep, deep yearning for fulfillment and love. Yes, there will always be others who oppose this type of change, and they'll fight tooth and nail to maintain the system, but this is simply how life is. It's not personal. This is not the first time a pandemic has struck humankind. In 2003, as recently as 2003, after the SARS epidemic, which was a coronavirus, it was well understood by scientists, and they were saying another coronavirus much like this is very likely. Now, here are the steps we have to do to take and prepare for it. But our leaders didn't listen. We have not seen this type of social unrest regarding injustice in this country since the 60s, but it's not new. You see, the virus of the mind is fear. Fear diminishes your perception. Fear, it blocks your perception. It inhibits wisdom, guidance, and direction. It seems the world has taken on a nightmarish quality, but it's living under the vibration of a worst case scenario. What's the worst thing that can happen? Okay, I get that. Yet from a higher perspective, from a higher altitude, if you will, we're in a time of cleansing. We're in a time of cleansing right now. In many ways, technology has made events more transparent. The murders of African American men by police was always happening. Now we can put it on camera. An old paradigm is ending and a new one is beginning. And the old paradigm is very loud and it's aggressive. It's fighting for its life. Against what? Against change. 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 Those who are waking up and embracing a higher order of being, of more love and generosity, service and compassion, are the messengers of a new vision. A new paradigm is yet to be. The other folks are messengers of the status quo and a world that is dying. The media has a hand in this as well, as they are reporting from an old paradigm. And truth be told, we forget that we do live in one of the most censored nations in the world. And we're only seeing that, what certain others want us to see. We forget that. This is what's going on. There's a lot of turbulence now. It's an old paradigm trying to hold on. And we must all learn, all of us must learn, this is crucial on some level, how to navigate and handle fear. We have to learn how to navigate fear and not to let it run our lives. If you pick up your newspaper, if you still read them, or pick up your phone and read it, and then go back 6 months from now and read it, what has generally replaced it, the news, is another set of stories that are designed to create more fear. And what you read 6 months ago is no longer even in the picture for the most part, because things do pass. And so I want to share with you some words from Dr. King's final speech, the mountaintop speech. The speech is so powerful to me for many reasons, not only though, because he implies the possibility of life before life, which many of you know I happen to subscribe to, but because he implies that if he could be placed at a certain place in time in history, he could fulfill his mission, his life's purpose. And so that to me implies choice, freedom of choice. The speech is April 3rd, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. The next evening, April 4th, 1968 at 6 p.m., Dr. King has left his body. He was shot dead in Memphis. He says this, and this reminds me of what we're going through now. He says, something is happening in Memphis. Something is happening in our world. And you know, if I was standing at the beginning of time with the possibility of taking a time of general and panoramic view, taking a kind of general and panoramic view of the entire scope of human history up to now. And the Almighty said to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? He says, I take my mental flight by Egypt, and I would watch God's children in their magnificent trek from the dark dungeons of Egypt through, or rather across the Red Sea, through the wilderness on toward the Promised Land. And in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would move on by Greece and take my mind to Mount Olympus. And I would see Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, Euripides and Aristophanes assembled around the Parthenon. And I would watch them around the Parthenon as they discussed the great and eternal issues of reality. But I wouldn't stop there. I would go on, even to the great heyday of the Roman Empire. And I would see developments around there through various emperors and leaders. But I wouldn't stop there. I would even come up to the day of the Renaissance and get a quick picture of all that the Renaissance did for the cultural and aesthetic life of man. But no, I wouldn't stop there. I would even go by the way that the man for whom I am named at his habitat. And I'd watch Martin Luther as he tacked his 95 Theses on the door of the church at Wittenberg. But I wouldn't stop there. I would come up even to 1863 and watch a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, but I wouldn't stop there. I'd even come up to the early 30s and see a man grappling with the problems of the bankruptcy of his nation and come with an eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. But no, I wouldn't stop there. Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty and say, if you would allow me just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy. King goes on to say, now that's a strange statement to make because the world is all messed up. The nation is sick, trouble is in the land, confusion all around. That's a strange statement, but I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. And I see God working in this period of the 20th century in a way that men, in some strange way, are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of the people are rising up, and wherever they are assembled today, whether they are in Johannesburg, South Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. Powerful words. Now, freedom may look different to different people, but one thing is for sure, the old way of living and perceiving is no longer viable. We need a new version, a new vision of humanity. Now, there was no COVID virus in 1968, but there was a virus of racism and militarism. There was a virus of sexism and exploitation. There was the virus of poverty and hatred. The point I'm simply trying to make here is that there is always change going on. and we are up to our necks in it. We are living in this particular time in history, and perhaps we chose to be here at this moment to assist the planet in this time of monumental change, for a different paradigm is being born. What if you actually did choose to be here at this time and place in history in order to make a difference? Because I believe you were. I believe I chose to be here at this time and place. Maybe not consciously. Maybe so for some of us. Yet here we are. I said to the universe that if I could just get a few years in the mid-20th century to the mid-21st century, I will be fine. I will be happy, and I will contribute. For those of you who say that nothing has really changed, look at what happened just a few months ago. The murder of Brother George Floyd has triggered tremendous change and shifts of consciousness in this country. Talk of police reform and holding police officers more accountable is on the table now. Confederate monuments are coming down. On June 16, 2020, the Supreme Court extended the protections of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to LGBTQ brothers and sisters by a 6-3 vote. An employer who fires an individual merely for being gay or transgender defies the law. Many more white brothers and sisters are becoming more woke, realizing somehow that their destiny is tied up with people of color in this country. They are marching and protesting in greater numbers than the 1960s. Nothing like this has ever happened before in some ways in U.S. political history. The spectrum of discussion has been substantially shifted. Things that were not on the agenda long ago are now front and center. Universal health care, called for and amplified by a pandemic disaster. Who'd have thunk it? A Green New Deal, the result of serious activism by a small group of young people who occupied congressional offices. We are awash in a sea of change, and it's happening all at once. Juneteenth has now become part of the nation's consciousness. Even Aunt Jemima, according to Quaker Oats, Aunt Jemima will get a makeover. It was announced that Aunt Jemima's origins are based on a racial stereotype. This was on June 17, 2020. Jemima's image will be removed and a new brand will be renamed. Now, on 4 days later, on June 22nd, a woman who once portrayed Aunt Jemima has called on Quaker Oats to reconsider. Her name is Lillian Richard from the great state of Texas, and she worked for the company for 20 years. One of her family members, Ms. Vera Harris, says, "We don't want that history erased." This is what she told the New York Post. She says, "I wish we could just turn it down, take a breath, and not just get rid of everything because it's good or bad. You know, it's our history." Removing these things wipes away part of me, and it's a part of each of us. Land of Lakes Butter has removed the Native American woman from their logo. Her name was Mia. Someone on social media wrote, they removed the Indian but kept the land. We can't have everything. But I told you, things do get messy. Let's also remember that on June 22nd, 2020, the Supreme Court ignores Trump's racial bias. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing the majority opinion, found that the government improperly terminated the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, known as DACA. So at least for now, 700,000 young immigrants can live and work in the United States without fear of being deported. We're up to our neck in change, and there's a spirit moving across the land, and we are fortunate enough. Dr. King wishes he could have been here to see this. Malcolm X wishes he could have been here to see this. Bayard Rustin, Fannie Lou Hamer. We are fortunate enough to be here, and no doubt some of us did not think we'd even be here to see this type of change, at least not as rapidly as is occurring, and people are responding to it. And yes, there's going to be changes that we will not be here to see, but that doesn't mean that we don't work and continue to work to create a better world. King knew that he would not live to be an old man. He would not live to see the changes we are witnessing, and yet he pressed on. He insisted that he enjoyed living at the midpoint of the 20th century because he could see God working in history, whatever that means to you, whatever that word means to you. He says he could see God working in history and changing the order of things for the better. Despite the prevalence of injustice around the world, he acknowledged at that time the nation's sickness and its unwillingness to grapple with the legacy of its racist past. He said he may not get there with us, but whatever he saw from the panorama of that mountaintop gave him hope. He saw change and it gave him hope. Perhaps it should give us hope as well. Amen, and blessed be. I invite you now to join in our closing hymn for this Sunday service, number 144. Now is the time approaching. Hymn number 144. Now we've come to the end of our service. I hope these words inspired you or gave you pause. It's a time to reflect, to open your hearts. We extinguish the flame as we close this service, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Thank you again for tuning in, and have a wonderful Sunday afternoon.